When one talks about some of the greatest gaming franchises ever made, then it goes without saying that BioShock would be an inevitable part of the conversation. The first BioShock was an insanely entertaining romp through one of the most interesting video game cities in the form of Rapture, and BioShock 2 was pretty much more of the same with a fresh coat of paint, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The release of BioShock Infinite cemented the series as an all-time great gaming trilogy. Once gamers have finished the series, they may be left wanting to find another game that feels just as brilliant. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Game Rent, where today we're giving you 20 of the best games that are similar to BioShock. First up, we have Atomic Heart. This game draws clear inspiration from BioShock, and while it doesn't reach the same heights, it's a solid debut for the developer. Set in an alternate 1955 Soviet Union, the story follows Agent P3, sent to a facility overrun with robots. The protagonist acquires a special glove that grants upgradable abilities. Despite some issues, the game boasts stunning visuals and an intriguing world, thanks to Mudfish's impressive work. Although the story takes a while to develop, the captivating setting keeps players engaged right from the start. Next up is Immortals of Aveum. Going by reports, Immortals of Aveum struggled to find an audience at launch, and the IP appears destined to be a one-and-done affair. Despite its flaws, Ascendant's game has many positives and is worth playing for fans of first-person shooters with a focus on magic. The fantasy setting is gorgeous and detailed, and the combat combining gunplay with magic is the main draw for BioShock fans. Though initially basic, the gameplay expands beautifully as players unlock new talents, offering a wide array of options reminiscent of BioShock's plasmids and weapons. Dead Space was originally released a year after BioShock, and the game received just as much praise as 2K's project. In 2023, EA and Motive Studio remade the game, granting it a fresh coat of paint while also tweaking a few things to incentivize veterans to revisit this survival horror masterpiece. While BioShock takes place deep in the ocean, Dead Space is set in the far reaches of space, and both settings are equally as unnerving and lonely as each other. Dead Space is a third-person shooter with weighty combat, horrifying enemies, stunning visuals, and great environmental storytelling. While lacking BioShock's philosophical musings, the title is a must-play for any horror fan. Our next recommendation is Spec Ops: The Line. When comparing gameplay, Spec Ops: The Line and BioShock barely overlap. Spec Ops is a military third-person shooter with linear and sometimes uninspired gunfights. Its gameplay is also more straightforward compared to the BioShock trilogy. Narratively, both games are psychological thrillers exploring the human mind's frailty, but they offer different experiences. Spec Ops focuses on the mental toll of war, challenging players to consider their characters' in-game actions. While it's not as replayable as BioShock, its unique story makes it worth a recommendation. Up next, we have We Happy Few. At a glance, it's easy to see why most people compared the visuals and atmosphere of We Happy Few to BioShock. The game has come a long way since its buggy launch and is definitely worth a buy with its lower price tag. It's a shame that the narrative of this title doesn't get enough recognition, since it's easily the best part of the overall experience by a country mile. We Happy Few takes place in a utopia that is seemingly thriving, although the citizens' smiles are fueled by less than wholesome means. Focusing on stealth rather than action, this project was perhaps slightly too ambitious for its own good, but its story and world are both memorable. While Mass Effect might not be as atmospheric as BioShock, there's still a case that can be made for this sci-fi RPG series. With the release of the Legendary Edition, more and more people can now get into this amazing trilogy. The epic story and memorable cast of characters are what made the Mass Effect trilogy such a beloved piece of gaming history. Due to being a space opera and third-person shooter, Mass Effect is very much its own beast compared to BioShock. That said, they both highlight gaming's singular ability to craft engaging and immersive narratives, even if they focus on different aspects. Next up is Metro Exodus. The Metro series wasn't really that popular for the longest time, which was a huge disservice to the immense quality of this title. However, with the release of Metro Exodus, people could finally see why so many people had fallen head over heels for this franchise. The atmosphere and gameplay of Metro Exodus complement each other beautifully, filling players with a sense of dread that BioShock fans would be quite familiar with. It's an easy recommendation for anyone who wasn't satisfied with beating down the likes of Frank Fontaine and Andrew Ryan time and time again. Our next recommendation is SOMA. Gameplay-wise, SOMA does not share all that much in common with BioShock, as it is a survival horror game rather than a first-person shooter with some horror elements. However, in terms of setting, they are cut from the same cloth. The game takes place in a horrifying underwater research facility that is run by a crew who happen to be the last humans left on Earth. Raising fascinating questions through its strong writing and unsettling atmosphere, this horror title is a must-play for anyone searching for games similar to BioShock. Singularity is positively dripping with a creepy atmosphere and is full of amazing time-bending powers, but ultimately failed to establish itself in the gaming mainstream. The game might have its issues, but Singularity is still an easy recommendation for fans of excellent first-person shooters. It also helps that using the time manipulation device to destroy an enemy in Renko's path never gets old. The scenery in Doom Eternal may be more gruesome than gorgeous, a contrast from BioShock's imagery, but the gameplay is equally exhilarating. Using various power-ups and awesome weapons, players can go on a demon-slashing rampage full of satisfying executions. Similar to BioShock, gamers take control of a mighty fighter from a first-person perspective, which makes them feel like they are part of the vivid, engaging world. There are nooks and crannies to explore for cool surprises and hot loot, making every second of wandering each level well spent. Next up, we have Close to the Sun. If Close to the Sun's setting is anything to go by, Storm and a Teacup's developers probably enjoyed Rapture. Set in the late 19th century, the game is predominantly set in a ship called the Helios. After receiving a peculiar message from her sister, Rose heads to this massive barge only to find herself stuck in a bizarre and haunting technological hellscape. Directed by her sibling's voice, Rose slowly explores the immersive but desolate ship as she tries to decipher what exactly is going on. Unlike BioShock, Close to the Sun does not have any combat, opting instead to focus on puzzles and information gathering. Our next recommendation is Lies of P. While Souls-likes do not play like BioShock at all, the genre loves to use settings that are not far removed from Rapture. From Software's masterpieces are often set in once prosperous kingdoms that have fallen into ruin, leaving nothing more than horrifying shells that used to represent beauty and strength. While taking plenty of inspiration from Software's games, particularly Bloodborne, Lies of P pushes its story more to the forefront while not bogging itself down in unnecessary cutscenes. More importantly, the main setting, Krat, is a gothic work of horrifying art. The city used to represent the pinnacle of humanity's technological advancement, but that hubris eventually birthed a hellscape. Deus Ex is considered by many to be a revolutionary game and patient zero for immersive sims. That's not to say it was the first to explore the genre's potential, but rather that the cyberpunk game actualized them in a way that could serve as a blueprint for future releases. Any person who loves the atmospheric storytelling of BioShock will definitely find a ton of things to like about Deus Ex. The game also emphasizes player freedom, consequences, customization, and exploration. System Shock 2's influential gameplay, brilliant level design, and oppressive atmosphere should make BioShock players feel right at home. While it might mostly be known for its infamous AI antagonist, this influential sci-fi game has way more to offer than just Shodan. Don't be put off by its age. This classic has actually aged pretty well, provided someone does not go in expecting a modern FPS experience. Our next recommendation is the System Shock Remake. 1994's System Shock is undoubtedly one of the most important games of the 90s, and has set the stage for not only its superior sequel, but also Deus Ex, and yes, BioShock. Although still playable to an extent, the original game struggles to hide its age, making it difficult to recommend to new players beyond its historical value. Thankfully, in 2023, Night Dive Studio released a remake that brought this masterpiece into the modern era, all while retaining its timeless charm and depth. The remake's gameplay received a significant overhaul, something that definitely needed to happen as the series never had particularly great gunplay. Let's talk about Thief 2: The Metal Age. The Thief series is considered a must-play by pretty much anyone who's in the immersive sim genre. Throwing players in the middle of a mysterious world in Garrett's shoes, players are tasked with weaving around houses anonymously in order to steal as much treasure as possible. The first game is a pretty decent title on its own, but it's Thief 2: The Metal Age where the series truly comes into its own. While the last game in the series might have bombed quite badly, there's no reason to think that the franchise is completely obsolete. The Wolfenstein series experienced a slump, with new titles receiving muted fanfare until Wolfenstein: The New Order revitalized the franchise. Fans celebrated BJ Blazkowicz's return, and the story was a surprising highlight. The excellent gunplay and high-octane firefights solidified its status as a true Wolfenstein game, setting the stage for a new era. While more Pulp Fiction than philosophical, the writing in both The New Order and its sequel, The New Colossus, is quite good. Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines is an obvious mention when talking about action RPGs similar to BioShock. The game is truly one of a kind, and even some gameplay jank won't be enough to harm what is objectively a great title, up until the very end when the studio ran out of time and money. Regardless, Bloodlines is still fantastic, and there's a reason why fans are so hyped for the upcoming sequel. Featuring some of the most immersive world building in the RPG genre, the game gives players plenty of freedom to craft their own paths, which puts it at odds with BioShock's linear campaign. Metroid Prime is an easy recommendation in most situations, but the original GameCube masterpiece can feel a bit off if someone didn't grow up with it. Fortunately, newcomers can just pick up the remastered version on the Switch, which tweaks the controls to accommodate modern sensibilities. This change turns the game into a more straightforward shooter, albeit one that still comes packed to the brim with fantastic puzzles, platforming, exploration, and boss fights. Metroid Prime Remastered is nearly flawless, which puts it right alongside BioShock. Both games drop players into desolate worlds that have seen better days, with Talon 4 as haunting and well-designed as Rapture. Though lacking BioShock's philosophical depth, Metroid Prime creates a tense, horror-leaning atmosphere through environmental storytelling and a constant sense of danger. Our final recommendation on this list is Prey. Quite a few Arcane games are easy recommendations for BioShock fans. While Dishonored might be the studio's most popular license, Prey is arguably the stronger pick for this discussion, and that largely comes down to Talos 1. After an intro, Morgan Yu wakes up at a research station that has seen better days. Overrun by alien entities that are anything but friendly, the ravaged Talos 1 has become a monument to humanity's ingenuity, greed, and vulnerability. Players have to explore this fairly big station, uncovering its secrets along the way. Prey's setting is reminiscent of Rapture, even if its sci-fi aesthetic proves a fairly different feel. The game also has somewhat similar first-person combat, especially once Prey gives players a few powers to mess with. While BioShock will probably remain one of the greatest gaming trilogies of all time, fans who want to try out other similar titles should try out one of these games. Thanks so much for hanging out with us over here on Game Rant, and we'll see you next time.